We're going to begin with the inside inspection. The first thing is going to be the air brake check. To begin, we want to make sure that we put our seatbelt on. We want to make sure our tractor and trailer brake are applied and our transmission is in neutral. We're going to proceed with the first step, which is the governor cutout. We want to make sure that our PSI and our primary and secondary gauges are at least 85 PSI or lower. When we turn the key on, so right now we need to lower the PSI by pushing and releasing the pedal until we get to 85 or lower. Okay, I lowered the PSI to 78 PSI in the primary and 79 PSI in the secondary. Alright, so we're going to turn the engine on and wait for the governor to cut out. It should cut out no higher than 140 PSI. Okay, the needles stopped moving at 123 PSI in the primary and 124 PSI in the secondary. That means that the governor cut out no higher than 140 PSI, so this is a good test. The next test will be the governor cut in. The governor should cut in and start sending air back into the tanks no lower than 100 PSI. In order to do this, we're going to push and release the brake pedal. We're going to wait 15 seconds to see if the PSI begins to rise. If it doesn't, we will repeat until it does, and then we will name at what PSI the gauges began to rise. So right there, our primary is at 110. Our secondary is also at 110, and we're going to wait the 15 seconds. The gauges did not rise, so we're going to do it again. We're going to press the pedal, get it close to 100 PSI, and wait the 15 seconds for the PSI to rise. The primary is at 104 and the secondary is also at 104, and we're going to wait the 15 seconds to see if it begins to rise. As you can clearly see, the gauges have begun to rise in both the primary and the secondary, meaning that the gauges began to rise at the previous stated PSI of 104 in the primary and 104 in the secondary, which is not lower than 100 PSI, so that is a good test. The next step we're going to do is the applied pressure test. Make sure to raise the pressure to its maximum PSI. In order to do this test, we are going to put the transmission in low gear. We're going to turn the engine off, and then we're going to release the clutch. Release the tractor and trailer brakes and make sure to allow them to stabilize. Okay, the PSI has stabilized. The next step, I'm going to push the brake pedal all the way down and I'm going to hold it for 1 minute. When we step on the pedal, we're going to reevaluate what PSI our primary and secondary gauges are at, and then we're going to wait the 1 minute to see if we lose any PSI. We should not lose more than 4 PSI for a Class A vehicle or 3 PSI for a Class B vehicle. So my gauge is stabilized at 94 PSI in the primary and 94 PSI in the secondary. And now we will wait 1 minute and we will see how much PSI we lost. Okay, we've waited the minute. Our primary gauge is still at 94 PSI. Our secondary gauge is still at 94 PSI. This means it's a good test because we did not lose more than 4 PSI for a Class A or 3 PSI for a Class B. Now you can release the pedal. The next step is the lower warning device. The lower warning device should activate between 55 and 75 PSI. In order to do this step, we must turn on the key into the open position, and then we're going to pump the brakes until we see a light, an alarm, or both turn on. As you can see, our alarm turned on and our light. The primary is at 66 PSI and 64 PSI in the secondary. That means it's a good test because our alarm and our light came on between 55 and 75 PSI. The next step is the emergency pop-out test. The emergency pop-out test, your tractor and trailer brake should pop out between 20 and 45 PSI. So in order to execute this, we will continue pumping the brake until both the tractor and trailer brake pop out, at which point we will call out what PSI they popped out at. Both the tractor and trailer brake popped out, 34 PSI in the primary and 31 PSI in the secondary. Meaning this is a good test because they did pop out between the 20 and 45 PSI. Next, we will begin our cab inspection. To begin, we will start with the safe start. We need to make sure our tractor and trailer brakes are set, the transmission is in neutral, and then we start the engine. While we wait for our pressure to build, we'll go ahead and address the items inside the cab. First are our mirrors. Make sure they're clean and well adjusted properly from the inside. Our windshield and our rear window should have no illegal stickers, obstructions, or damage. Wipers and washers. The arms and blades must be secure, not damaged, and operate smoothly. The washers must work. Light indicators. The left and right turn signals, four-way flashers, high beam, all indicators must work. The oil gauge. It must be working and between 40 and 60 psi or normal operating range. Temperature gauge. Must be working between 180 and 190 degrees or normal operating range. Voltmeter. This must work and be between 12 to 14 volts. The air gauges. They must work. The needle should move up and down when in use. Heater and defroster. Both must work. Horns. Both the air and electric horns must work. Emergency equipment. Check for spare electrical fuses, 3 reflective red triangles, and a fully charged and rated fire extinguisher. Safety belt. Securely mounted, adjusts, and latches properly, not ripped or frayed. The next section we will be doing is the brake test. To do the brake test, we must have the engine on, the tractor and trailer brakes applied, the gauges at max PSI, and the transmission in first gear. First, we'll test the tractor brake. We release the trailer brake and slowly move the vehicle forward. The vehicle did not move, indicating that the tractor brake is functioning. Next, we will test the trailer brake. We now apply the trailer brake and release the tractor brake. We slowly move the vehicle forward. The vehicle did not move, indicating that the trailer brake is functioning. Last, we will test the service brake. Now we release both the tractor and trailer brakes. We slowly move the vehicle forward at 5 miles an hour and apply the brake pedal. The vehicle stopped and did not pull to either side, indicating that the service pedal is functioning. Before starting on the outside inspection, ask the examiner to assist you in checking the left turn signal, the right turn signal, the four-way flashers, the headlights, and the brake lights. The front of the vehicle. The lights, all clean and functional. The clearance on the tractor and trailer must be amber, the turn signals must be amber, the four-way flashers must be amber, and the headlights must have high and low beams. The header board must not be cracked, bent, or broken. The fuel area of the vehicle. The frame must not be cracked, bent, or broken on the frame or cross members. The exhaust. Check for damage and signs of leaks like rust or soot. Connected tightly and properly mounted and secure. The drive shaft. Not cracked, bent, or broken. U-joints should be properly mounted and secure and free of foreign objects. The catwalk and the steps. They should be solid, clear of objects, properly mounted and secure. Fuel tank. Properly mounted and secure. Caps must be tight. No leaks from the tank, caps, or lines. Door. Not damaged. Open and closes. Hinges secure with seals intact. Mirrors. Mirrors and mirror brackets not damaged and properly mounted and secure. No loose fittings. Windows. Must be clean and work properly. Now the engine compartment. The alternator. Identify its location. Properly mounted and secure. All wires securely fastened. The belt is not cracked or frayed and has less than 3/4 inch of play. The water pump. Identify its location. Properly mounted and secure. Must not be leaking. The belt must not be cracked or frayed and also have less than 3/4 inch of play. The coolant level. Must be at the proper level through the sight glass or checking through the radiator cap. Hoses and leaks. Look for dripping fluid on the ground around the engine and transmission. Listen for air leaks. Check hoses are well attached at both ends and no abrasions, bulges, or cuts. Air compressor. Identify the location, that it's properly mounted and secure and is not leaking. The air compressor is gear driven. Power steering level. Locate the dipstick. Make sure the fill mark is in operating range. This is also gear driven. Oil level. Locate the dipstick. Must be above the fill mark and in operating range. The steering. The steering box and hoses. They must be properly mounted and secure, not leaking, no missing nuts, bolts, or cotter keys. The steering linkage. This consists of the steering column, pitman arm, drag link, and tie rod. All must not be cracked, bent, or broken. Joints and sockets are not worn or loose no missing nuts, bolts, or cotter keys. Front suspension. The spring mount must not be cracked, bent, or broken and properly mounted and secure. No missing hardware. Springs. Not cracked, bent, or broken, properly mounted and secure, no more than 1/4 missing or broken. U-bolts. Not cracked, bent, or broken, properly mounted and secure, not missing any hardware. The shocks. Not cracked, bent, or broken, properly mounted and secure, and not leaking. The front brakes. The brake chamber must not be leaking, not cracked, bent, or broken, and properly mounted and secure. No loose or missing clamps. The slack adjuster. Properly mounted and secure, not cracked, bent, or broken, and no missing hardware. Push rod. Not cracked, bent, or broken, should not move more than 1 inch when pulled by hand. The brake hoses and lines. No abrasions, bulges, or cuts, should not be leaking, and well attached at both ends. The brake drums and lining. Not cracked, bent, or broken, no loose or missing hardware, no oil or grease present, and the lining should be at least 1/4 inch. The front axle. The tires. They should have a minimum depth of 4/32 of an inch on the fronts and no recaps. The condition should be evenly worn and no abrasions, bulges, or cuts. Valve caps and stems not missing or damaged. The inflation should be checked with the tire gauge. The rims. Not cracked, bent, or broken, or loose. No welding repairs and no rust. Lug nuts. All lug nuts must be present, not cracked or distorted. No signs of looseness such as rust or shiny threads. Hub oil seals and axle seals. See that the hub, oil, and grease seals and axle seals are not leaking, and if it has a sight glass, oil level is adequate. The same inspection on the suspension, brakes, and axles done on the driver's side applies to the passenger side. The coupling system of the tractor and trailer. The air lines. Check for air leaks. They should have no abrasions, bulges, or cuts. They should be well connected on both the tractor and trailer ends. The glad hand should be locked in place, free of damage. The electrical line. Not frayed, well insulated, and connected firmly on both the tractor and the trailer ends. The fifth wheel skid plate. Properly lubricated, attached to the platform, and not missing bolts or pins. The platform should not be cracked, bent, or broken. The mounting bolts. No loose, missing, or damaged hardware. Properly mounted and secure. The release arm and safety latch. The release arm is in an engaged position and safety latch in place. The locking jaws. They should be fully closed around the kingpin and not damaged. The kingpin should not be cracked, bent, or broken. The apron should not be cracked, bent, or broken. The gap. There should be no gap between the fifth wheel and the apron. The rear suspension. The spring mount. Not cracked, bent, or broken, no missing hardware, and properly mounted and secure. The springs. Not cracked, bent, or broken, properly mounted and secure. The U-bolts. Not cracked, bent, or broken, properly mounted and secure. Not missing any hardware. The shocks. Not cracked, bent, or broken, properly mounted and secure, and not leaking. The airbags. Not leaking, properly mounted and secure, and no abrasions, bulges, or cuts. The torque arm should not be cracked, bent, or broken, and should be properly mounted and secure. The rear brakes. The brake chamber should not be leaking, not cracked, bent, or broken, and properly mounted and secure. No loose or missing clamps. The slack adjuster. Properly mounted and secure, not cracked, bent, or broken, and no missing hardware. The push rod. Not cracked, bent, or broken, and should not move more than 2 inches when pulled by hand. The brake hoses and lines. No abrasions, bulges, or cuts, not leaking, well attached at both ends. The drums and brake lining. Not cracked, bent, or broken, no loose or missing hardware, no oil or grease. The lining should be at least 1/4 inch. The rear axles. The tires. The depth should be at least 2/32 of an inch, minimum on the rears, and recaps are okay. The condition should be evenly worn, no abrasions, bulges, or cuts to tread or sidewalls. The valve caps and stems not missing or damaged. The inflation should be checked with a tire gauge. And the spacing. Dual wheels should be evenly separated with no debris in between. The rims should not be cracked, bent, or broken, or loose. No welding repairs and no rust. The lug nuts. All lug nuts should be present, not cracked or distorted. No signs of looseness, such as rust or shiny threads. The hub oil seals and axle seals. See that the hub oil and grease seals and the axle seals are not leaking, and if it has a sight glass, that the oil level is adequate. The same inspection on the suspension, brakes, and axles done on the driver's side applies to the passenger side. The rear of the vehicle. The splash guards. Make sure that they are not damaged and properly mounted and secure. The lights. All should be clean and functional. The reverse should be white, the brake light should be red, the tail lights also red, the turn signals red, and the four-way flashers red. The side of the trailer. The landing gear must be fully raised, no missing hardware, the crank handle is properly mounted and secure, and the support frame not be cracked, bent, or broken. The frame should not be cracked, bent, or broken, no broken welds, holes, or other damage to the frame, cross members, or trailer floor. The lights and reflectors should all be clean and functional. The clearance lights should be amber. The turn signals should be amber. The four-way flashers should be amber, and it must have the proper reflective tape. The trailer suspension. The spring mount should not be cracked, bent, or broken, and have no missing hardware. Should be properly mounted and secure. The springs should not be cracked, bent, or broken, should be properly mounted and secure, and have no more than 1/4 missing or broken. The U-bolts, not cracked, bent, or broken, and properly mounted and secure, should not be missing any hardware. The shocks, not cracked, bent, or broken, properly mounted and secure, and not leaking. The airbags, not leaking, properly mounted and secure, and no abrasions, bulges, or cuts. The torque arms, not cracked, bent, or broken, and properly mounted and secure. Next is the trailer brakes. The brake chamber, not leaking, not cracked, bent, or broken, and properly mounted and secure. No loose or missing clamps. The slack adjuster, properly mounted and secure, not cracked, bent, or broken, and no missing hardware. The push rod, not cracked, bent, or broken, should not move more than 2 inches when pulled by hand. The brake hoses and lines should have no abrasions, bulges, or cuts, should not be leaking, and should be well attached at both ends. The drums and brake lining, not cracked, bent, or broken, should have no loose or missing hardware, no oil or grease, and the lining should be at least 1/4 inch. The trailer axles. The tires should have a minimum depth of 2/32 of an inch on the rears, and recaps are okay. The condition should be evenly worn with no abrasions, bulges, or cuts to tread or sidewalls. The valve caps and stems should not be missing or damaged. The spacing. Dual wheels should evenly be separated with no debris in between. The rims should not be cracked, bent, or broken, or loose. No welding repairs and no rust. Lug nuts. All lug nuts must be present, not cracked or distorted. No signs of looseness such as rust or shiny threads. The hub oil seals and axle seals. See that the hub oil and grease seals and axle seals are not leaking, and if wheel has a sight glass, oil level is adequate. The same inspection on the suspension, brakes, and axles done on the driver's side applies to the passenger side. Rear of the trailer. The splash guards must not be damaged and properly mounted and secure. The lights should all be clean and functional. The clearance lights should be red, the brake lights should be red, the tail lights should be red, turn signals should be red, the four-way flasher should be red, and it should have the proper reflective tape. The door The rails and rollers or hinges should not be cracked, bent, or broken. The door should open and close. With this, we conclude the outside inspection.